All right, 2.1 here. This is identify and configure firewall management interfaces. So this will be the first thing you do when you unbox after racking your firewall. So there's four main methods used to access the firewall. Right out of the box, you can use CLI or you could use the web browser. If you use the web browser, you just have to note that the firewall by default is going to go into the 192.168.1.0 subnet. It's going to give itself an IP address of 1.1. So if you want to access that, you need to put your computer in that subnet, not 1.1. But once you do that, then you can access the browser via HTTPS. I don't believe HTTP is enabled by default. So yeah, the four main methods to access it: web interface, CLI, Panorama, and XML API. By default, you can use web interface, you can use CLI. Panorama, that is the kind of centralized management that Palo offers. If you have more than six firewalls, they recommend you to use Panorama for more seamless policies, more streamlined policies, I guess. And then your XML API. That way, anything that supports REST API can integrate with this and communicate. So all firewalls do have an out-of-band port. Um, Basically, is like a management VRF for the Cisco folks out there. This port's going to be used to do your updates. It's going to be used to do your generally your management. By default, your data ports are not going to permit SSL, HTTPS, or SSH, any of that. So by default, you're going to have to use the management port to communicate to the firewall. Um, this port is on the management plane, as it sounds like, so it does not function in the data plane. It is isolated. Yeah, and so the updates that you'll receive from that will be licenses, threat prevention, updates, um, all that fun stuff. It's also going to be what uses NTP and DNS by default. You can use service routes to go around that. It talks about that a little bit later here. And here we're just kind of talking more about the methods. So yeah, the CLI. So you're going to use 9600 baud to connect to that. 9600 8N1, I believe. Um, by default, you're going to be in operational mode, and it's basically just going to let you run a handful of commands. It might let you do a show command, ping and trace route. That's really about all you're going to get. If you want to do anything management wise with it, you're going to have to go to configuration mode by typing configure. I typically do this when I stand up a firewall. It's just easier for me to script out a IP address setting through the command line than it is to change my IP address of my computer and navigate to the web browser. So here's an example of show system state. That'll show you kind of the generic flavor. What's going on with your firewall. What are the general settings? So that's CLI. Panorama, again, if you have more than six firewalls, they suggest using this. It looks just like the Palo Alto firewall as far as the user interface, but they use a concept of templates and stacks to kind of help push policy to more than one firewall at a time. XML API, just like it sounds, you can create XML API accounts that can communicate to this. You browse to it here, so firewall/API Um, can create, update, modify configurations. We used this with a logarithm, and it worked pretty well. It's pretty easy to do. So interface management profiles. So here they talk about how you're not forced to use the management port to manage the firewall. For instance, if you use an out-of-band network and that goes down, it might be helpful to use a in-band port to log in and do whatever administrative tasks you need to do. So by default, it looks like these settings are enabled in that profile. So if I were to create a management profile, and I wanted to, for some reason I needed to permit telnet to the firewall, I would have to go and select what options I want to use to manage this with the network services. So it might be super helpful to permit SNMP on your in-band interfaces. So you would just select what you need in here. You would add the IP addresses you want to be allowed to access this. So it's basically an access list that only permits, these packets from these devices. And I believe, I need to double check, but I believe if you have HA configured, you need your HA added to these permitted IP addresses too, for your management interface. I don't think you would need it on this profile for an in-band interface. And let's see here. Under the actual interface in network, you can actually, assign the management profile to the interface. It's pretty slick. Here we're going to go into the dashboard. So it's nothing crazy. It's pretty easy to navigate. You have 7 main settings. You get the dashboard. That's going to give you a centralized view of your widgets, which are totally customizable. So you might want to see your system resources, but you don't really care about, who all's logged in. So you can get rid of that and kind of just customize it however you want. There's a lot of different options you have here. ACC, that's going to give you the kind of a trend of what's happening on the network. It'll give you a pretty good idea. Like 80% of your traffic is SSL, and it might be going to, Europe for some reason. So that's pretty handy. Monitor, that's where most of your logs are going to be stored. That's where all of your logs are going to be stored. So your URL logs, your traffic logs, all that good stuff is going to be in those that monitor section. Policies, that's probably where you're going to spend most of your time in here. That's going to be the security and NAT policies that are typically going to be used in here. You also have a QoS policy as well as some policy-based routes. I believe the policy-based routes are in policies. And then you're going to have objects, just like it sounds. It's where your objects are stored. You can also have object groups where you containerize multiple objects. Those objects can be IPs, fully qualified domain names. It could even be applications, services, you name it. Network, that's where you're going to configure your interfaces, your zones, your virtual routers, your routing, and then device. That's going to be where a lot of your configurational items are for the system. So it's where your HA is going to be. It's where your user ID settings are going to be. All of your interface, let me rephrase that. All of your management interface settings are going to be, there's quite a few settings. Your licenses are in there as well, and your update tasks. The tasks, these are going to be down at the bottom right over here. It's kind of a weird place, but those will show you the active tasks. So it might be DNS refreshing. It might be an update It might be a commit, but that's what you click on to see what's going on. Service routes. This is where you would go if you wanted to use an in-band interface for various services. So you could use, in this case, they're saying, hey, for DNS, I want to use this interface and this address. So, it's nothing too crazy. There we go. So here's the full policy. So here it shows your source address, your source interface, and the destination. So up here you would define the source of what do you want the traffic to come from, what IP address, what interface, and here you're going to say the destination. Hey, I want to use 8.8.8.8 for my DNS, but I want it to come from my in band because we block internet from our out of band. Something like that. They also go into the firewall services. So, they do support DNS, DHCP, and NTP. You can assign a DHCP address to your device. Your device can also facilitate DHCP to clients in various zones and interfaces. Yeah, this says DNS and NTP must be set during the initial firewall configuration, so that is a must. This is where they're actually showing you, hey, you can use DHCP for your management interface, so you get it from a DHCP server, or you can set it statically. And then your NTP settings over here. Let's kind of follow in some notes here. A couple things I left out, I guess. Well, just one. And as of Palo 9.1, when you log in, you are forced to change the password now. So before that, you could keep the admin username and password. Now, after you log in, you're forced to change that password. Hopefully that wasn't too painful for anyone listening. Kind of a high-level overview. So I guess if we want to do a couple of these, one or two management methods. Definitely going to be CLI, not going to be RDP, not going to be VPN, XML API. Or two devices used to connect a computer to the firewall. So you can use an RJ45 Ethernet cable. That's what we were talking about. You would have to assign your computer 192.168.1. whatever, and then you would navigate to 1.1 and serial cable. 1.1 is the default management interface. The two default services, SSH and HTTPS. Remember, HTTP and Telnet are not they're plain text services. I don't remember service route policy. I think they do have rules applied against it. I'm pretty sure they do. We'll go back and double check, but I'm pretty sure they do. And the two types of traffic you can forward are going to be Palo updates and EDLs. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.